Welcome to the Shem Kolel here in Shtach, Israel. And as I was saying that yesterday, there was a question in our 2:30 class, what we do to bring Moshiach. And we didn't get to record that class, and so maybe we'll record the answer now. And there are, I would say, from the most important things that we could do to bring Moshiach is, first of all, the Rebbe says that we can study about Moshiach. Because, as we have here, show the audience, a new book called Live Redeemed. Get that on Amazon. Part of the idea of Moshiach is a change of consciousness. I remember asking Rabbi Simon Jacobson, who, of course, edited many of the Rebbe's talks. And the last couple of years, the Rebbe spoke on a very high level, a lot of it about Moshiach. And very complicated for many people to understand, because a lot of us, they say harder than it is to take the Jew out of exile, to take the exile out of the Jew. Because often we're born into a reality, particularly if you have trauma from the past, if you see reality in a certain way, and you have to now shift yourself to see reality in a different way. And the whole point that the Rebbe is trying to tell us is that Moshiach has begun. It's a very, very important point to realize. Because the Rebbe is trying to tell us that we're not in the oivei mode of the past. I mentioned the story of Dr. Goldberg, who was a doctor with the Russians. They liberated Auschwitz, and he found the Siddur there. He told me that he thought that Yiddishkeit was over, because in Russia, 70 years, they basically shut it down. And then in Europe, he went, and they didn't really have any information. The Russians were very careful with information they let people see. The whole news media was just one big propaganda lie. I know a guy, I think he was in Uzbekistan, and it was one of the countries that Russia was controlling. There was an earthquake at 6 a.m. But the news didn't report it until 10 a.m., even though everybody felt it. Why? Because they were afraid to say anything they didn't have permission to say. That was the fear of the newscasters. So there's an earthquake. They can't even say there's an earthquake. The whole thing was complete propaganda, and it was all about manipulating people, which unfortunately they still do very much in Russia. So, this crazy idea that they're going against the Nazi regime when the president of Ukraine, his own grandfather, is a survivor. But be that as it may, most people in Russia believe it, because if you hear a message again and again, and it's a little bit your field, it's presented in a sophisticated way, so it fools the brain. The brain says, that person, in any of it. So we're here to share the truth, and the truth is what matters. So the truth is that life has never been better. You have to shift, and it's a very, very important message that we have to give the world. Very important. Life has never been better. In fact, my wife was watching this lady here in town, I think Shipper Hendry or something. She has called the Geula Summit, right? And she gets really good people that they interview. And to make a long story short, one of the ladies that she was interviewing, trying to remember the exact point. Anyway, the idea is that the times that we're in now are amazing times. When we compare the times that we are now, she's a mind-body coach. And it's connected to helping people that are sick kind of use the mind-body connection. She had MS, and she kind of, Baruch Hashem, cured herself. And so her point was that the media gives people anxiety. Now, I was on a plane once, and I was going from Africa. So it was interesting. I was sitting over here, and next to me, there was an older African gentleman. Next to him, a younger one. And the younger one was telling them about the problems of the world. So the older one looked at the younger one, and he said, your problem is that you see Western media. He says, I look at the media of the whole world. Western media, it's all negative. Chinese media, it's all positive. Because China wants the people to think everything's good. So the point is that it's a really bad thing. And since I stopped watching the media 2016, before Hillary, I was like, I had enough of the shagas. And I said, no more media. And I'm telling you, 2 weeks later, I was happy. 2 weeks. Because it's like this toxic chemical of negativity. And anybody that wants to be happy, first of all, has to get rid of misery. And then media, what is a peddle of misery? So a person has to get rid of the media. Either as a bay, getting back to Dr. Goldberg, so Dr. Goldberg thought Yiddishkeit was over, and then he comes, and there's a very important lesson, because here you're getting a Jew that was literally living in Gullus, and then he comes to America, the land of freedom, a land in which Jews have opportunity, and he comes and he sees a Jew with a tallis. He hadn't seen a Jew with a tallis in 70 years, and he follows this person into shul, and he notices that there are no police. So he told me, you are telling me that Moshiach has come? I'm telling you Moshiach has come. I know Moshiach has come. So you take Jews who for thousands of years were persecuted and beaten and all the worst things. And now, here we are in Eretz Yisrael, Tzfas, right here in this country. You know, we just heard the alarm for Yom HaZikaron. I don't know if you know the story, but Tzfas had a very big miracle. Familiar with the story of 48? Amazing story. So the Jews have been in Tzfas literally uninterrupted for 4,000 years. You know, Yaakov Avinu came to Tzfas maybe 400 years while we left to Egypt. But literally for 3,300 years, Tzfas, the reason Tzfas is called Tzfas is because there was a Kohen family. It was called Tzfat, one of the 24 Mishmorim. The first base, the second base was a Levite city of refuge, a very holy city for thousands of years. So the Jews were here. And then the British in the big steps was the Arab side and the Jewish side. And the British didn't want any problems, right? They made these kind of watchtowers and steps to watch between the two. So the British told the Jews, listen, you got 10,000 Arabs that all they want to do is, God forbid, kill Jews. You got 2,000 Jews. Basically, they were defenseless. The Ottoman Empire, right, kept everybody poor. And so, why don't you leave? And we'll give you a safe haven. We'll help you leave in a safe way. So the Jews had a meeting and they said, listen, we're here for 2,000 years. We're not leaving. Which was really a Mesiras Nefesh sacrifice. From an intellectual standpoint, was a suicide step. And then what happened was that night, 40 soldiers of the Palmach came, and they had these little kind of bazookas. They called them the Davidkas. They shot over these little rockets into the Arab neighborhood, and they didn't really do much damage, but they made this big noise. And Hashem made a miracle, because like you see the beautiful sun, the Yemai Sachama, where it doesn't rain for 6 months. Hashem made a thunderstorm the next day, a massive thunderstorm. So the Arabs thought that the Jews had detonated a nuclear bomb. So they all ran. 10,000 Arabs, literally what they were capable of slaughtering, God forbid, they all ran. And so this spot is, we're standing on a real miracle right here, right now. Hashem should do the ultimate miracle, the resurrection of all the dead soldiers that ever said, all the soldiers that gave their life, Kiddush Hashem. You know, it's beautiful to see the way that Eva looks. Somebody once came to Eva, he said that, I don't remember what it was, that it says about a Jew and the Talmud that sinned. So he said, he had a negative approach. So Eva said, I don't understand your question. My question is the other way. How can you say a Jew sinned? They ever said about the Jews that were the soldiers that went to war in Yom Kippur, and this is very, 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 very profound what I'm saying. This itself, I think, could bring Mashiach. The soldiers that went to war on Yom Kippur, so 1973, in a very cowardly way, Egypt and the Arab armies attacked the Jews on Yom Kippur. In fact, they didn't realize they did a big favor. Why? Because the army knew where to get all the Jews. They mobilized in a second. They're all in Shul. But there were some Jews that weren't in Shul. They're the Jews, the Chilonim, or whatever, tell them, they're like Dafker, they're eating, you know, Rabbi Evan, you spell who you knew. Once met a Chilonim Jew, he says, you know, every day, every Shabbos, I take my steak and I go to the Tel Aviv beach. And every Shabbos, I said, wow, you mamish keep Shabbos. He said, Rabbi, what do you mean? So you make a whole thing out of Shabbos. So they'll say, the Rebbe said, these Jews, they use the energy of their food that they ate to save the Jewish people. they transform that energy into holiness. Why do I say that this can bring Mashiach? Because this is a very, very important point. Because it's about learning to judge favorably. Basically, in life, there are three ways a person can exist. One way is the way of non-judgmental, right? A person that's naive and don't like to use labels, but if you want to call it liberal, real liberalism, not judgmental liberalism, which is really radicalism. But by nature, I've said it before, they say if you're not a liberal by the time you're 20, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative by the time you're 30, you have no head. Right? So real liberalism, which is this openness, so this kind of an attitude is basically boils down to one thing, which is I want to perceive everyone in a beautiful way. So I don't judge anyone. And it gets very complicated because if people start to judge me, and I say, no, they must be right, because I don't want to judge. I don't want to separate. So I say, maybe I did something wrong. So like the senator talking in front of AIPAC, he said this line. He says, a general once said, it's time to take our side in this war, So this kind of liberalism, what does it do? It accepts the judgment against oneself because I don't want to judge the other. And it makes all these convoluted things. The aggressor is really the victim. The guy that's the thief is really, he's been abused. But the other way is you judge everyone. And that's kind of a defensiveness. But there's a third way. And that is that you learn how to try to judge favorably. Once in a while, if you have to take action, you take action, because that's really the way of the Torah. The same Torah that says don't kill is for mitzvahs to kill. For example, if you're going to see an Arab about to kill a Jew, your job is to take a gun and to shoot him. And the same thing is, God forbid, if you saw a Jew that's about to kill another, that guy is an aggressor. And the mitzvah is for everybody to kill the aggressor, because not to act in a time like that is to allow innocent blood to be shed. So the point is not to be totally non-judgmental, not to be totally judgmental, but to try to judge favorably. That's the key, to try to judge favorably. And in fact, that's much greater than the person that's non-judgmental, because the person that's non-judgmental is really looking out for this kind of the hippie movement. It's like a friend of mine that was a hippie, became a big chassid. He said, the hippies, they love you until you sit on their hammock, right? That's my hammock, buddy. In other words, it's this feeling that I love. You're the one. It's not that so much that I love the world. I love not feeling separated from the world, which is nice. But it's not so much about truth. It's much more about my emotion. I could get high for the same price. They say the Hasidic story, the Hasidim, there was their farbrengen in the middle of the night, and they needed some mashka. They went to, we're going to up like 24-hour stores today. Their stores closed at 5 p.m. So they found a local drunk, and the guy had a bottle of vodka. So they go over to him. They say, do me a favor. Can you sell us the vodka? He says, no. Sorry, it's my bottle. We'll pay you double. Nope. Triple. Nope. 5. Nope. 10. Nope. Are you crazy? 10 times as much. Tomorrow, you can buy 10 bottles. He says, listen, you're the idiot. He says, with this bottle, I own the whole Russia. So in other words, in this delusional state, the whole world's perfect. They love me. I love them. Everything's beautiful. But of course, it's not true. If God forbid, I have a friend connected to the U.S. Army in a very, different, ways. So next to Canada somewhere, there's a nuclear silo, nuclear site. They had a couple of Boy Scouts that came there. They're interviewing, and there's a general that comes down to talk to the kid. They have to explain to the kid what's going on. And these are like massive silos, like the real deal. So he says, if your enemy has a little rock, you have to have a bigger rock. So one of the kids said, but sir, maybe you both can put down the rocks. So the general goes, next question. So in a way, the kid is right. Put down the rocks. But the problem is, what if the other guy has a rock? Right? If America didn't have, and the best type of army, the Rebbe actually says that Israel has to have this kind of army, and this kind of army that America has, Why is America safe? Because its rock is bigger than other rocks. So therefore, the other guy's not going to attack. So on the contrary, if Israel wants to be safe, they have to have the best nuclear weapons, the best weapons in the world, which Baruch Hashem, they do. And so then why are Arabs making peace with the Jews? Not because we're weak, but because we're strong. And so they say this is a good partner to have, someone that can protect them. And of course, we know that it says in the Kabbalah that the fall of Damascus is the rise of Jerusalem. And I heard that the Rebbe said that before Moshiach comes, there will be boots on the ground in Damascus, even for half hour. The Rebbe wanted very much. This is a very important thing. Why? Because the Arabs, many people don't really know Arab history and don't understand the Arab mentality, but the Arabs basically come from Yisrael. So the Arabs are really the half-brothers of the Jews, and they have a deep sense of shame, which is unfortunate, going back to the times of Yishmael. And therefore they have a jealousy of the Jewish people and of Israel, because they were kicked out of Israel. Arabs went to Arabia. It actually says in a Medrash that Avram Avinu visited Yishmael in Arabia. So when the Arabs came out, and you even look at the Quran, the writings, the whole goal was to take their pride by imposing their will on others. And they were very successful. Within 100 years after Muhammad's death, they escaped out of Saudi Arabia, and they literally became a massive empire. And the seat of that empire was in Damascus. That was where what they called the caliphate was. The caliphate was like a ruler, one of the descendants of Muhammad. That's why a lot of people don't understand what ISIS was about, that this al-Baghdadi, I think that was his name, was claimed to be a descendant of Muhammad. He was creating a new caliphate. It's a very, in Muslim terms, it's a very important concept. They believe in this world, the Ummah, which is one caliphate, that the caliphate will take over the world. And so what's really happened to them is a realization that this whole thing is a crazy dream, which doesn't, it's an illusion. Muhammad was basically, according to one of the greatest doctors of the world, was just delusional. And the whole thing doesn't make any sense, because today, with nuclear weapons, there's only so far you can push a country. Eventually, they'll just nuke you. So it's like the whole idea, maybe in the olden days when you were macheting people, this stuff like that could work. But today, it will never work. It can't work, because any country that has nuclear weapons eventually will just nuke you, and the whole story's over. So the story is that this whole, so when Damascus falls, and to a large extent it has fallen. I spoke to a guy, I don't know, I think he was from Syria, but a guy that knows the things. The place is rubble. The place, it was actually a guy that was there, not a Jewish guy that traveled. The place is if you look at Aleppo, just look at a picture, it's like a bombed out town. So the final step is it's like a house of cards, the whole place. The final step is Israel's gonna, walk in there, put an Israeli flag over his whatever his name's palace, and even just for a little bit. But then they'll realize that this whole fantasy of taking over the world and suppressing the world under their domain is over. And that's actually why it's very interesting. Also, a lot of people don't understand this. What was the intention of the wars against Israel? It had nothing to do with, or I should say this, it had a lot to do with the Arab need to be on top, as well as the Muslim need to be on top. But as they realized that it won't work, right? They had the 48 war, the 73 war, the 67. Every single war just makes them look bad. So eventually, and this is really the hand of Hashem, because with the Arab Spring, they come to the realization, and in fact, the West came to this realization after 2 world wars, that actually we're the idiots. We're the ones, this whole way of life that we have trying to conquer is stupid. Let us try to have peace. And this is really, on their level, a big realization. Be that as it may, what it really boils down to is this technique in life, which is, you think about the path of the Baal Shem, you think about the Alpha, they were very unique, even amongst the Jewish leadership that we know of. You would say that who is closest to the path of the Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu is obviously the path of Hashem. But which of our sages was closest to Avraham? To definitely say that the Rebbe was the one that represented Avraham Avinu most. Why? Because his whole life was about spreading the knowledge of Hashem, but doing so in such a way of tremendous encouragement. There's a beautiful story that I saw from Rabbi Yossi Jacobson that an old man came to Avraham Avinu. He was like 96 years old. And he comes, and Avraham were in his 90s. Maybe I made a mistake with the 96, but he was in his 90s. And Avraham Avinu spent 6 hours with this guy, trying to convince him that idols are wrong in this one guy. And after 6 hours, Avraham Avinu says, "No, did I convince you?" So he took out his little idol, which was on his necklace, and he gave it a kiss. So Avraham Avinu got, as they say in modern language, he was PO'd, he chased him out. So Shem came to Avraham and says, "Avraham, I waited 90 years for this guy to do tshuva, for this guy to learn about you couldn't handle him for 6 hours." But think about it, the Eibishter waits a lifetime of a person. It says, Shem waits for a person even till the day of death that he should do tshuva. We can't have more patience than God? And the Rebbe was the same way. The patience of, now again, the Rebbe was not, a liberal that said everybody can do what they want. No, the Rebbe had a very clear goal, very clear, we spoke about this importance of doing a website, which is very important because there is such a thing as right or wrong. There is such a thing as truth. But there's also such a thing as not judging the other person. Your job is to help them find the truth. Your job is not to judge them for not doing the truth. Now, where does this judgment come from? It's very interesting where judgment actually comes from. Judgment is a very deep psychological premise. And this is what it says, which is that the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. We kind of mentioned this idea of the importance of love, and this is where love gets tripped up when people start to judge. Love doesn't judge, right? So, but a healthy parent does guide the child. So where do we go from this point of loving and educating to judging? Somebody else was at our class yesterday, and he came from a very kind of group, a Jewish Orthodox group, which is very judgmental. He said very sad about, kids that get kicked out of the community for not learning Torah all day. You can see that there was a lot of trauma involved. So where does it come from? It's very interesting where it comes from. It says the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because of, what were the 3 sins that the Jews did that destroyed the first Beis HaMikdash? Right? 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 What are you going to say? Yes. Okay. So the 3 cardinals, the worst sins possible. I mean, it's unbelievable to think that Jews were murdering, and they were committing adultery, and they served idols. Horrific to think that. And yet they did. 70 years later, they had done tshuva. We know that the Jewish people accepted, it says they accepted Hashem in the times of Haman. They realized this Hashem's not playing games. It's the real stuff. And they did tshuva. And we find that Jews never did that sin again. And 70 years later, they're back. What was the reason for the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash? Right? That people, they were religious. And they involved in charity. Yet, they had needless, baseless hatred between one another. There's an interesting concept. Why? Because it says the first Beis HaMikdash that was destroyed because of sinas chinam, because of the 3 cardinal sins. We know what the problem was, and therefore they could solve the problem. But the second Beis HaMikdash, we don't know what the problem was, so we can't solve the problem. In fact, I recently saw a very interesting line from the Kolel Rebbe. He was a great tzaddik. He lost 11 children, and I think a wife in the war. And he said, there's one thing not in the war, in the Holocaust. And he says, there's one thing I missed from Auschwitz. How could anyone miss anything from Auschwitz? He said, we were all basically shaven, huddled together, that suddenly it didn't matter whether you were a Litvak, you were a Chassid, we were all one. In fact, Einstein speaks about this. He says that Einstein was a big Zionist. They wanted to make him the president of Israel, the first president. I don't know if you know that. He's a very big believer in Hashem, believer in the Jewish people. And so Einstein, in fact, when he was expelled from Germany, or he left Germany, there was a young reporter that said, "So, Einstein, how do you feel about being Jewish?" He said, "Young man, if I could, I would choose not to be born Jewish, but not because of the reason you think. When I look at the world and I see how callous they are to the plight of the Jewish people, how callous, how they don't care, I wish I could choose to be Jewish." So, in other words, he was a deep man, a deep thinker, that he was very, very affected. Anyway, separate issue. Getting back to the story at hand. So the question is, why do we say in the second base of Mitzvah was destroyed because of a sin that we don't understand? Everybody understands that sin, baseless hatred. But it's a very deep subconscious sin. If a person sins in something like idolatry or adultery or murder, God forbid, they know that they sin. I remember I was walking 2 a.m., in Ben Yehuda Street, like the interesting characters start to come out. So my friend and I were walking, and my Mashpia, just whatever. Jew comes up, we're schmoozing with him. He's like, "I was in prison for 8 years, but I deserve to be there. I stole." So I was like, Jew, he's like, fine. So he didn't have any issue. He knew he stole or whatever the issue was. He deserved to be there. He understood it. However, when a person judges another person, they always think that I am right and they are wrong. My grandfather, he had a very beautiful relationship with my grandmother, Rabbi Yosef Weiber, Tanya, and he made up with her. He was a very, very, very smart man, big hustler. They made up together before they got married. Whoever thinks they're right in an argument will be the first to apologize. Very, very deep part. Why? Because whenever a person is arguing and they think they're right, and the more they think they're right, the more wrong they are. Because a healthy mind, this crazy idea of a cancel culture, a healthy mind is able to listen to another opinion and is able to say, "You know what? I hear you, but I disagree." So that's the difference really between a child and an adult. An adult who's basing himself on intelligence says, "Okay, this is right and this is wrong, and this is what I must do and this is what I mustn't do." Somebody that lacks, mental maturity, everything has to go this way or that way. It could be for different reasons. Now, sometimes it could be an addiction, but other times it comes actually from fear. So fear can create a certain mentality of we behave very, very rigidly. A big psychiatrist once told me this, which is obvious and true, that what does fear create? If a person's living in fear, it creates rigidity. Often you'll see, unfortunately, somebody that's living, someone in fear, everything has to be perfect, right? The Germans have this kind of thing. If you get out of line, they'll all go crazy. Why? What do you care? You want to get out of line. But the thing is, you're thinking, why is it that you can step out of line? Like this one guy told me, I don't know, it was like a red light and he walked across the street in Germany. Everybody was upset with him. What are you so upset? Why you? So the reason is because you're not following the rules because you want to. You're following the rules because you're afraid of the criticism that will come to you if you don't. So this kind of a behavior creates a subconscious resentment over the people that are free. And so then what it does is it creates a bullying, so they should feel also imposed upon as opposed to freedom. And so that's the difference between the Rebbe. The Rebbe is trying to give us the right way. The Rebbe is saying, I know you want to do the right thing, and here's the right thing to do. As opposed to somebody else that's saying, oh, you're bad for doing that. why would a person do that? Because the reason they're behaving in a certain way is because they're afraid of criticism, and they're criticizing because subconsciously, not a conscious level, subconsciously, they're upset that that person has freedom and they don't. So once we can release ourselves out of this kind of judgmentalism and realize where it comes from, we can be free. We can really be free, because it's kind of to untie a knot, you have to know how you got tied into the knot in the first place. So if we can understand that we all have this somewhere along the line, often apparent, it's because subconscious. People don't know why they're doing it. I see it very clearly in my life. I'm not proud about it, but there were times in my life that I was less stressed. It's very clear stress creates judgmentalism. According to the Torah, when we're in a state of stress, we become more judgmental. So you say, what's the connection between stress and judgmentalism? But it's deeply connected, because there becomes a jealousy of the person that not misbehaving, but like not so rigid. So ultimately, the Rebbe said that, very interestingly, I started off with this concept. So just to finish this concept, this is a very important concept. Why? Because our goal in life is to basically be non-judgmental, but not non-judgmental in a way where I don't care about the other person. That's not real love. Real love is in reaching out with love. I do care about the other person. I care so much that I'm going to be vulnerable for you to criticize me. Like Lubavitch is the ultimate example of love. Why? Because you go in the street and you say, "Excuse me, are you Jewish?" Now, the guy that's saying that, it's not easy. You're putting yourself out there because you're making yourself vulnerable. But at the same time, why are you doing that? Because you care about the other person. So that is real love. And the Rebbe says, trying to remember, I don't remember exactly, but anyway, the point is, I think the Rebbe says it. Yeah. The Rebbe, somebody was asked the Rebbe in like Yechidus, like a young man asked the Rebbe, what's the difference between a Zeba and a rabbi? The Rebbe says, a rabbi waits for you to come to him, a Rebbe goes to you. That's like the difference. The Baal Shem, the Rebbe, they went to the Jew. We're going to make ourselves vulnerable. We're going to go do the work. If we get criticized, whatever, the shluchim that first came today, Chabad is the largest Jewish movement. When it started out, it was the smallest. So the idea is, very interesting. Where did this come from? I don't remember exactly where I heard it, but somebody said that it was in the Nep Petrov, the Nep. So somebody got the file to Rabbi Yitzchak, the Rebbe's father. Yeah, Rabbi Yitzchak. Huh? Yeah. So he got his file. So the KGB agent that gave him the file, the KGB opened up, they're good for the Jews now, etc. So the Chassid gave him a book, which was, I guess, the underground Chabad, underground movement, or whatever it was, maybe. So the guy says, "You're telling me about Chabad? I've been to 770. So he says, "You were at 770? How could you have gone to 770? He says, "I was like a spy. And we decided, one of the KGB, the one thing they said about the KGB, if there was a conversation that 5 people had in the world, they had a recording. They knew about that conversation. So he was sent to New York to study about Chabad. Okay. So they come, and you got different Jewish movements. You got, Fifth Avenue. You got the Jewish Agency, and big buildings in Manhattan. They come to Chabad, basically in a basement. They said Chabad is a revolution, because revolutions happen in basements. Very, very deep. The one thing, nobody should underestimate their wisdom. Revolutions happen in basements. So the story is that this goal of taking the responsibility of reaching out to the other person is the way of Hashem. This is the way of Avraham Avinu. It's our job to reach to the other. Now, Also, it's very important, something that we didn't mention yesterday, but it's very important because the Rebbe says the merit, very interesting talk. The Rebbe says the merit of the righteous Jewish women that are going to bring Mashiach. Ultimately, the mitzvah that's going to bring Mashiach, the merit of the righteous Jewish women. And we know that we are a reincarnation of the Jews that left Egypt. And that generation, the righteous Jewish women, they believed in Hashem, even though it was almost impossible. Everything around them said that this reality is Egypt. And they said, no, that's not reality. Hashem promised that He's getting us out. They made sure to have children. They kept the flame of Hashem alive, even though it says that the men were idolaters. So they obviously were. Hashem was very grateful. Something that the Rebbe told my grandfather, it's not that well known. And the Rebbe's we find this more than any maybe tzaddik in history, dealt directly with women. Women were able to come to him directly, like tremendous. He spoke directly to women. Part of the reason is because for Mashiach to come, the women have to do their mitzvahs. And that's why there's a big challenge, because in this generation, the two mitzvahs that bring Mashiach, it's Niyat and Shabbos candle. And so the Rebbes were there to educate the women on their godly role, that they're so great and they're the ones bringing Mashiach. So when a person knows this, they'll be happy to do the mitzvahs because they realize the impact that they're having. And so I think that's why there's such a challenge of Tznius today, even though I think it's the nature of a woman to be Tznius, because the Golus is like the Klippa is trying to. Rabbi Gafni actually told me that the Rebbe said about a French designer that I guess he was designing clothing that was Tznius. The Rebbe said on him Yamach Shemai, which is an amazing thing to hear. So there has to be a very, very strong campaign for women to dress Tznius, to light Shabbos candles, because they are the ones that through this mitzvah, they bring in. Every woman that does this can bring Mashiach, because it's such a challenge, and therefore the light that is produced is commensurate with the challenge. Really, all the women today, Baruch Hashem, there are hundreds of thousands of women that we see dressed in a Tznius stick away. They really have to be commended because they are beating the Yetzer Hara. They're the ones that are really bringing Hashem into the world. And so this is really a tremendous, gift. The Rebbe has a whole sikh about the greatness of the Jewish women and girls of today. Sikha, that's the title of the sikh. Al derech ma'alos benois d'shei Chabad, the of this generation. So we really have to respect and commend the women, because obviously it's a tremendous challenge. And those women that do it are succeeding. I think a nice idea would be to be able to open up stores where like the Tznius clothing are like half price, encourage everybody, Have an idea around that? Okay, so we'll finish, and then I'd love to hear your idea. We should make the idea public. But, okay, so we should go back to the public, but in event, so may everyone have a beautiful and amazing day. Shkaya.